Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session of Association Exchange. We're going to begin the program in just a moment. We want to give our attendees a moment to connect. I see a number of you have already joined us. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kurt Gallagher. I am one of the organizers for Association Exchange. And in the spirit of the holiday season, the Halloween holiday season, I'd ask you all to put in the chat, what makes you most apprehensive? What causes you the most fear as an association professional in these times we are in? Again, in the spirit of Halloween, it's the spooky season. And I don't see anyone playing along. We have member disengagement. That's a big one. I agree. That's been an issue that I've seen quite a bit lately. Any others? People now showing up. That's kind of a variation of the first. Any others want to share your sort of fears, apprehensions in the association world? Government participation, crisis, funding cuts. Yes, yes. These are all challenges that we deal with, and they actually fit in with the theme today, which is on advocacy. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Bober, who will be our Master of Ceremonies, and he's going to introduce our presenter, Dr. David Rehr, today. But these are all comments that really tie into the theme of advocacy. So thank you all. We have one more association exchange for the year after this, and I'll provide details at the end of the session. But with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kurt. Good to see and hear from everybody. I am Mike Bober, trade association executive for about 12 years now, certified association executive, and an occasional presenter and guest speaker in the classroom for one Dr. David Rehr, who's our guest today. Dr. Rehr is a professor and the director of the Center for Business and Civic Engagement in the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. He previously served as both the president and CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters and as the president of the National Beer Wholesalers Association. So he definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to association engagement. He's got more than 25 years of experience in advocacy, governance, and public policy, and he's an authority on communicating with Congress. In fact, he's so much of an expert in the area that he's written multiple ebooks on Congress, associations, and leadership, and he's the author of the Congressional Communications Report, currently in its 3rd edition. He also serves on the Virginia Board of Humanities as a director, and as I said, is just somebody who really does a great job of communicating to the next generation of advocates what it takes to get your message across. So with that, Dr. Rehr, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Mike, for having me, and welcome everybody to the seminar. We're going to go through some slides and then we'll have plenty of time. But if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get them answered, or we'll break in and get them answered. Anyway, it's great to be with you. I'm going to talk a little bit flipping the topic. My background is I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked for the National Federation of Independent Business, which is the largest small business group in the country, not an association, but kind of a quasi-association, the National Association of Beer Wholesalers, which was, as you can imagine, an ideal group to work for because we had a lot of fun. Then I became the president and CEO of the National Association of Broadcasters, representing every radio and television station in America and about 45 companies around the world, which was very awesome. Then I left the association business because my wife and I got married late and we decided to have 4 children, all within the ages of 5 or 6 of 6 years of age of each other. And I just needed to be at more time. Like many of you, you're always on the run, you're always moving, you're always flying or going places, you're always meeting with members. And I just didn't want to do that and ruin my family. So from there, I went to George Washington University, taught for a couple of years. Then I went to the Scalia Law School at George Mason University, and then ended up going to work at the Schar School where I currently am, and I run this civic engagement project. So I'm going to flip the topic to be, we all lobby, and we all lobby all the time, whether we know it or not. And, years ago when I came from the Chicago area in the Midwest, and I came to Washington, I never thought about advocacy, but we do it all the time. And let me give you some examples. When you go to the grocery store, you're picking what kind of yogurt flavor you want. And those yogurt companies are positioning those yogurt yogurts on different stages of the aisle. They're making them different colors. They're appealing to you to buy. And that's what we do as associations. We appeal to people who share some common membership attributes to buy. Another example is when you decide, if you decide to get engaged or married to a spouse. You're asking that person, you're making the advocacy case, you're influencing them to say yes. Now, it took me 3 years to say, ask my wife, because I was always worried she would turn me down. 34 years later, there's occasional days when I look at her, I'm like, you said yes 34 years ago, can't change your mind now. Then there are in association examples where you're having meetings among staff and you're making a pitch to an idea or a program and you need everybody's buy-in. You're hiring people. You know, when you hire people and you meet with them, you never say, you don't really want to work here. It's a really terrible place. It's awful. Our mission is really BS. I don't know why I stay. I just can't get another job anywhere else. Hopefully that is not happening to you. If it does, get a job somewhere else because you'll do better and you'll really enjoy your life a whole lot more. You join professional organizations. We have a lot of them in the association business. We have degrees you can get in the association business. You can become a CAE. It's all done to allow us to build on each other's experiences, diversity, inclusiveness. And I think we'll hopefully have some of that today. Well, you'll share your stories as well. And then, of course, there's word of mouth, which I believe is still the most effective way to drive advocacy and to drive influence. Here are just some more examples. When I was at the beer wholesalers, and I'm a pretty I see myself as a pretty enthusiastic, positive person. But I remember being on Capitol Hill and we went in for a vote and we actually won on an important amendment. And the members came out and I felt like I was a football player because I said, hands in the middle. We all put our hands in the middle. I'm like, go, go, go. We're going to win. We're going to win. And they were like bouncing up and down and they went back on the House floor and we actually won that amendment years ago. Dealing with your president or your CEO of your association in one-on-one meetings or small, intimate meetings where they're laying out their vision, their goals, their qualitative and quantitative metrics they want you to hit, and you're discussing that. Looking at online, and I know many of you, unlike me, are more online oriented, and a lot of things are done online, but I would argue online is essential to success, but it still is not the most important thing for associations. Members, because they have a lot of choices, which I will talk about in just a second, want to still understand the value that your organization, your association provides, and might even want to know the value that you provide. Because at the beer wholesalers, I would have people say, David, I know you're president, but what do you really do? And I can't say, I turn on the lights and I turn them off when everybody goes home. Because you're asking them for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year, some of which they can take tax deductions on, but a lot of which they can't. But I would argue that every association position lobbies. Now, you might not be on message, you might not go to Capitol Hill and see members of Congress or congressional staff, but you're lobbying. You're lobbying your members when they call you in the morning and you say, good morning, it's the XYZ Association. You're the first voice they hear and they understand instantly, am I being welcomed or are they just putting up with me? And there's little things in life which we can talk about where you send signals to people if you really care or are you just in it for the money and you don't really care. What are the challenges? Challenge number one, association members or potential members have a short attention span. Favorite research ever? Research tells us that a squirrel has a longer attention span than a human, which is 3 seconds. So you have less than 3 seconds to demonstrate that you understand, you're delivering value to people. And here's some examples of members. I know beer wholesalers, broadcasters, they're getting 168 on average, 168 million emails a second. If you could flip back to the previous slide, Mike, thank you. These is what people face every 60 seconds, and you can see them all. And I can make this presentation available if any of you want it. But my favorite is the 600 plus videos posted, totaling over 25 hours on YouTube every minute of every day, 24 hours a day. And if you're trying to go, I go to YouTube to learn stuff, you just get overwhelmed by all the stuff, the information flow that you have accompany you, as do your members do. Next slide. The second challenge is that members and potential members face lots of competition for their time and attention from other associations, which are your competitors. Now, I'm a big market guy. I have an advanced degree in economics from George Mason, but I always think about everything is in the terms of a world of competition. You know, there are 12,000 lobbyists, 200 million communications, 3,400 lobbying firms, 64% of organizations host DC fly-ins, which also are very effective to do. There are 66,000 trade associations, organizations, and associations, 1.5 million nonprofits. And on any given day, one of your association members or potential members could get solicited by them to join. And at some point, the money's going to run out. They're going to have to choose whether it's you or them. We'd like to live in a world where it's yes to everybody, but we all know in Washington we're facing now, it's not yes to everybody. You got to make some hard, tough decisions on what you value most. So I look at this rest of the presentation, I'll go through this kind of quickly, that we want to have 8 steps or so to maximize your association advocacy, what you do and what the people you work with do, and what the government relations functions do every day. Number 1, diminish, eliminate internal silos, which I've faced my whole life, and I'm sure you face as well in your organization. Set association expectations, and we don't do enough of that. When I meet with my graduate students now at George Mason, the first thing I say at the beginning of classes, as a professional, you have to set expectations. Otherwise, everyone's in the Vulcan mind probe thinking about, well, I got this job. What's really expected of me? Well, go to the computer, turn it on. Maybe you see a video, but you don't really know what you're supposed to do because 95% of the time, the job description they give you and what you actually do is very different. Differentiate your organization because you have all this competition in DC. I just read a stat that said we are now up to 5 billion plus in spending on advocacy and on organizations and on trying to get our messages across the country. Be sure your mission is simple and succinct. Release association results. Many of you may not be as quantifiable as I am, but I like everything quantified. I like my lobbyists that I worked with who are great at both organizations for many years. I would require that they meet with so many members of Congress or so many staff each year. That was written into what their job expectations were because they'd meet it and they'd often exceed it. And then when we would do the review, because you forget what you do in January or February, and you're meeting in December, and you go, you know, you actually met with 50 more members and staff than you were expected to. Good for you. And they can kind of tap themselves on the shoulder and go, you know, I really did a good job. I did a lot for this organization and for our membership. And most importantly, be enthusiastic and positive. Nobody wants to be with a downer. Everyone's got enough challenges in their life. They want to be with someone who's upbeat and positive rather than someone who's like, well, the world's ending in 8 years. They said that 9 years ago. You know, enough said. And then demonstrate fun. You know, working for the beer wholesalers, that was really easy. The broadcasters were a bit harder because they're very serious people, even though behind the TVs and radios, they're not that serious. They're fun too, but they've got to always project this image of being so serious and so dignified. And then you want to stay on the offensive no matter what you're doing in association. Again, because the world is moving so quickly, we just have to stay on. And, you know, it used to be, and I know I find that to be a pain, but we are all underpaid because many of us are working around the clock. Next slide, please, Mike. So we have 55% of organizations work in silos and are fighting the negative sides of it every day. You got to fight it. I've never been in an organization, even at George Mason University, you know, we have departments, we have schools, but there's still silos. And sometimes, unfortunately, one silo is not talking to the other silo, and you're not being the most effective you can be and the most efficient you can be. Next slide. Set association expectations, not only for yourself and for your staff and your teamworks, but for your members as well. Here is what we're going to do for you, these three things. You don't have to give the long list of 25 things. No one really cares. I don't mean to offend anybody, but if you have a car rental business, because anybody can rent a car, and they probably can do it cheaper on their own credit card. What is the essential things you provide that no one else can provide, and you do it very well? And after you set those expectations and report on those expectations, people will be very thrilled with your organization. Differentiate your organization. Everyone, we all look different, we all act different, we're all from different cultures, which is a great thing in America. But your organization can't be the same. One of the things we did at the beer wholesalers, which was lots of fun, is we made a movie about beer wholesalers because no one knows who they are. If I would ask you all, how do you know what a beer wholesaler is? You probably wouldn't get it right. But it's actually the person driving the truck that says Budweiser or Coors Light or Miller Lite from the brewery to retail outlets. So if they're stopped, you see a big truck stopped at 6 o'clock in the morning at 7-Eleven, that's probably a beer distributor's truck. A lot of members of Congress, a lot of staffers, a lot of people in Washington, D.C., a lot of friends of mine who are in the association business had no idea of what beer wholesalers did. So it was up to us to explain from our perspective what we did and why it was important. Be sure your mission is simple and succinct. You can go on any search engine and find all sorts of great examples of mission statements. I picked Starbucks here. They want to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time, which I think personally, I don't drink coffee. I probably should, but I'll probably be bouncing off the wall if I did. But I think that's a great mission statement because it's pretty clear what they do. And you see it reflected in their ads and expanding benefits to employees and stuff, because it's all about the coffee, one cup at a time in the neighborhood, making the neighborhoods and frankly, the country better. Number 5, release association results, quantitative versus and qualitative value. Now, there is so much of a controversy on this, particularly in the government relations field, but among some membership units as well, membership, communications. People don't like being quantified. They don't. You'd rather say at the end of the year, you remember say you all did a great job, which is terrific, but I think it's important for yourself that you measure yourself so you can always be better. You're always stretching yourself to be better, to be more engaged, to provide more value and services. And I think you have to give quantifiable results. I'm for quantitative results too, if you're like on NBC News, but that doesn't happen to a lot of our associations all the time in the country. Next slide. Be enthusiastic and positive. I'm a big fan of Winston Churchill. You may or may not be. I think he was a great man who stopped the world, frankly, from Nazism, which really is an indelible positive thing that we can look back on. But he said, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And I think about that, and like all my things in my life, I've probably failed as much as I've succeeded. You can't be afraid of failure. You just have to learn from failure. And as Churchill said, go to the next point that you want to make and just do it very positively. Demonstrate fun. So at the beer wholesalers, I grew up in Chicago. Bill Veeck was the owner of the Chicago White Sox. And when I was growing up, he would give things away. He gave hats away. He gave mugs away. Believe it or not, he gave baseball bats away at games. So at a Chicago White Sox game on the south side of Chicago, they used to stand and literally give full-size baseball bats to every kid under 18. Now, you would not imagine anyone doing that today for a lot of reasons, unfortunately. But I could never get the Bill Veeck sign out of my mind. And I'm like, we want people to like us. We need to give them things. And there's a congressional threshold of $12.50 before you have to recognize it as a gift. So I looked for things that were under $12 that would sit on people's desks that would remind them of me and my lobbyists and our members in our association. Mugs, uh, I can't think of the word right now, but koozies, which were only like 50 cents a piece, travel mugs that the staffers then could take from their morning coffee into work, leave it in their car, take it back home. I've been away from the beer wholesalers for more than a decade, and I will occasionally see friends of mine who will be in a car and they'll stop and we'll get out and they'll go, Dave, still have my coffee mug. It's totally awesome. And then we occasionally would give beer to people if they got married, if they got divorced and it was warranted, if they had an anniversary, because again, it made them think about us. And if they thought about us, we would think about them and we'd be able to advance not only our legislative issues, but then the member might go back and see a beer wholesaler in South Dakota and go, "Oh, I just saw David." And the member would say, "Yeah, I saw David too. I got a mug. This is awesome." And they would renew their membership. And often they would provide more financial resources. And then at the NAB, we didn't have the beer spirit, but we had broadcasting. So we made sure that our current logo and design was relevant, because one of the big criticism is radio and TV are old mediums. They're no longer needed. And we wanted to be sure that people understood that both television and radio was an essential distribution channel for information. And then we also, Mike, if you could click advance, did an MBA credit card. Why did we do that? Because before I got there, we had 168 staffers, all who had their own credit cards. It was cumbersome. It was a nightmare accounting for the accounting department. And I said, guess what? We're going to give you all a credit card, and it was going to, and when you're going some places, hopefully you'll take the credit card out and somebody will say, "Oh, wow, what's that?" You can then talk about the NAB, constantly motivating our people to talk about what they do and why it's important. Number 8, stay on the offensive. Again, Winston Churchill, I've got like hundreds of quotes of his around my office, but continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential. The reason I say this, and we're going to go to then to questions, hopefully you'll have some questions. The reason why I say this, I'm from the Midwest, a working class family whose mother and father never went to college. He was a postman. And he drilled one into me. He said, America's a great country. You just have to work hard. You just have to outwork everyone you're around. And I tried to instill that in myself. And I've been pretty successful in my career. Could still be more successful, I would think, in many ways. I meet a lot of other people. I'm like, you've written 25 books. You won a Nobel Prize. I'm nothing. But if you work really hard in the association business, and you're really focused and really determined and really provide value, you'll shoot up to the leadership and really make a name for yourself and leave a lasting legacy. And with that, why don't we go to some questions? And maybe we can drop the share screen so I can see the people who ask.
Sure thing, David. Actually, why don't I start us off with one question, really to just kind of tie everything back together. And that is that, obviously everybody who's here is, either an association executive or an association member. When you say that advocacy is part of everyone's job within the association, can you give kind of a more like a tangible example of how somebody who is in maybe a support role for an organization can really be an effective advocate for the mission of their group?
Yeah. Let me give you a couple examples. So let's say one, you work in membership. You're the person who, let's say, answers the phone in membership. Someone calls who's not a member and is looking for information, and you help them, and you're pleasant to them, and you're enthusiastic and positive to them. They're going to take away everyone in the organization is like this, because you're the only person they have contact with. And I've actually seen people join based upon getting a phone call or receiving a phone call return from someone who's just the receptionist, whether it's a man or a woman. Marketing, got to be relevant. Members are paying money. They're working really hard. They have their own companies or their own jobs or their own professions. they want to be sold. They want to be marketed to because that's what they do. That's how they make their income. And they want people to be clever and I mean, we used to do things like we would search out non-members and we would send them fake insurance forms. You know how you look at the insurance form and there's like 15,000 questions to fill out. So I once said, let's send them an insurance form so they could fill it out. We said, if you knew Congress was doing this and if you knew a regulator was doing that, and you could check yes or no, how it would affect you. Where at the end it's like you total it up, it was like $12,000 a year it would add to their business costs, but membership was only 1,000. And the question then would be, does it make more sense to be a member to get the benefits? And you're always going to find a lot of people who just throw in the garbage, but that's the life, the world that we live in. But a lot of people, I would say 90% of them joined. And then
So there was a question from Matt. If persistence is key, how do you message the importance of consistent engagement to an apathetic membership?
well, and Matt, good question. If they're apathetic, core messages are not getting through. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, sure, maybe you're, and I don't mean to offend you, Matt, but one, is your association still relevant? Or have you made it still relevant? Two, if they're apathetic, you're not getting to them correctly because they're not zombies watching AMC reruns. They've got businesses or they're professionals in some way. They have something that drives them. You just have to, and the challenge is figuring out what drives them. And then three, make sure you're speaking to them in a way they understand. And this is, I don't want to dish our people in Washington, but often we're in Washington. It's a bit of a silo. It's not really like the rest of the country. It's certainly like not from rural Minnesota where I lived for many years. And they talk differently in rural Minnesota than they do in Washington. They don't use acronyms. They don't refer to things that no one really knows about. It's plain and simple kind of bread and butter issues. So you have to take your sophisticated knowledge of DC and your group, whatever it is, and boil it down to what does this person care about? And am I communicating it to them? And then am I using every device to get back to them? Because if you just send emails, a lot of people don't read their emails. You might send mail, maybe some open, but it's going to be a combination of things. It's not the same answer for everybody.
Another question is, what do you think is the number one advocacy threat to associations today? Is it taxes? Is it rescinding research grants? Is it the downsizing of government and the trickle-down effect? What do you see as the number one threat to most associations? I know there's a lot of different associations.
Right. They have a lot
most associations across the board.
I think and you guys might not like this answer. And if you don't like the answer, someone else raised a question. I think the number one challenge is our people aren't thinking outside the box. That we've been in association. I mean, I've been in the association business for a long time. I won't reveal my age. I look much younger than I am, but I think we have people now who want to do the same thing over and over and over and over again, or at least I see that. And that bores me. So I turn my attention and money other places. I think if you have exciting, positive, upbeat messages that mean something to the person, they'll respond. And this is true of nonprofits. I mean, think of all the nonprofits. And I was for a while on the board of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Group, and they raise $100 million a year privately, and they work to get $100 million from Congress to do research to eliminate juvenile diabetes, which is a terrible, terrible disease. I mean, people go blind, they die, they have to have their limbs cut off. It's terrible, and they do nothing to deserve it. It's not like they drank too much and hit a tree or whatever. It's just like it's in your genetics. And I just think we just have to be a lot more, quit blaming other reasons and focus on what we could do to solve the problem ourselves. Nonprofit groups and some associations drive me nuts because they say, David, we don't have enough money to influence. I'm like, you don't need money. Well, we don't have enough influence. I'm like, who are your members? Are they related to anybody in Congress? Do they go to church or synagogue with anybody in Congress? Do their kids go to school together with anyone in Congress? You would be surprised by how many people are what's Kevin Bacon, uh, so many steps away from a member of Congress, but they're constantly worried about what they don't have rather than assessing what they do have.
So here's another question. 501(c)(3)s, I can't even read this. C4Ss, C6Ss, all have different rules about what they can say and do to advocate for their organizations, lawmakers, and staff. What are some of the ways associations can be sure that what they're saying and doing is on message and doesn't cross any of the lines
Right.
that, those thin lines that differentiate those tax differentials in
Yeah.
association?
So I would say number one, being a reasonable, responsible person, have lawyers check what you're doing because you don't want to make the mistake because then you'll get investigated. Number two, you can say, because I teach a class on advocacy to graduates, is the First Amendment allows all of us to have free speech, and you can say, or your members can say whatever they want. There's no restrictions on them. Institutionally, if you're writing things down or sending things up to Capitol Hill, they have to be checked to make sure you're not crossing the line, that you're not advocating for something that you're not supposed to be advocating for because of your tax. But it's not really that thin of a line. I mean, you can educate people, which is not advocacy, but you can educate people on why supporting this philanthropic healthcare initiative is important because it saves lives, and no one's going to attack you saying you're lobbying and you're doing it illegally.
Yeah,
It's
I would jump in on that, David, just to kind of chime in and agree that one of the things we've always been told is education is in the clear, especially if it's issue-based.
right, right. But you have to, and because we're unfortunately in such a polarized world, you just have to be careful of the kind of language that you lose when you're educating them on issues. Like she's a tyrant, stuff like that.
Yeah, that seems to be like it's straying a little bit from the
Right.
issue.
Yeah, it does. It
Yeah.
does. It does. And
So
it gets people upset. I'm sorry.
here's another question for you, David. You mentioned silos, and I think every association has experienced this, or at least most of the ones that I've worked with or worked for. What's your best advice to how to fight the silos within the association environment?
Right. So it depends on how big your organization is. But for me, I mean, at the beer wholesalers, we only had 16 employees. At the broadcasters, we had 168 employees. But I would have on big issues, big meetings for the full staff. In fact, every year I had goals, quantitative goals I would figure out. I'd post them up on a big screen. Then I would have every vice president of every operation stand up there in front of all their people and in front of everyone else, posting their goals as well, because they would tell their own people, but they wouldn't tell the other people. So they'd be like, why are we doing that? Well, we don't know. Well, no one ever told them because it's in my goals and I don't get my raise unless I hit the number. So have the meetings. Also, people, particularly junior level staff, always think secret things go on in meetings. And I would often, even with smaller meetings, invite receptionists, secretaries, lower level, and they're all important people. They're not lower level people, but in the hierarchy, maybe they're lower in the hierarchy is a better way to say it. I would invite them into occasional meetings so they could see nothing secret's going on and have a better sense of what's going on. In my view, more educated staff means a better association on all levels.
So as a Marcom person, I would say communicate, 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 right?
Right.
It's
Oh,
like
you're
in real
right.
estate,
You're
it's
right.
location, location,
Yeah.
location.
Yeah.
And this is the final question. You mentioned having fun, and I can certainly see how the national beer wholesalers would be fun. But in this current advocacy GR space that's so divisive, and you touched lightly on that too, how can you add fun to such a sort of strongly polarized, serious, set of issues? How would you inject fun into that process today?
Good question. I probably would, and this is, I'm just thinking this through quickly because I know we've gone over time here and I wanted people to get back
No,
to their
we're
work.
fine. We have till 1/4 of, but
Okay.
yeah, we're fine.
I would say number one, don't get in the mix. No matter what your personal feelings are, keep them to yourself because you will slip up and you will say something and then someone else will find out about it and you will be either on the red list or the blue list, which the opposite color then says can't trust them. So don't say anything, keep it to yourself. Number two, be enthusiastic to everyone. Treat everyone with respect and kindness. I mean, there are a lot of members up there, still up there on Capitol Hill, who probably never liked me very much. And they told me they didn't like me very much for the issues or my personality or what I individually believe about the future of the country. But I was always extremely nice to them because it's hard to get mad at a nice person. Just like it's hard to be divisive when you have someone nice in the room. Now, my favorite example is early on in my career when I was working on Capitol Hill, I went to a meeting on an issue on insurance reform, and I went to this association. I won't name them, but they were pretty ideological. And I was sitting there and they went around the room. They said, let's have everyone introduce themselves. And I'm like, okay, the jig is up. So they went around, there's this person. And I'm obviously thinking, I am like the only person here that's not in the group, so to speak. They get to me and I go, I work for a congressman from Minnesota. Thinking, Minnesota's pretty bipartisan. A lot of people think maybe, it's someone. And the woman looks at me, the CEO of the organization looks at me and says, which congressman? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be heard here. And I said, really? I mean, I was really proud of who I worked for. And I said, I work for Congressman Vin Weber, who was a Republican from southwestern Minnesota. I said, I work for Congressman Weber. She looked at me, she said, he would never be allowed in this office.
Oh.
Now, what did that do to my participation in that coalition meeting? I'm like, if you're going to be like that, we're not going to work with you.
Yeah,
There's a lot
down.
of things you guys believe that I don't believe. I'm shutting my mouth because I'm here to talk about insurance reform. I'm not here to talk about military, the flag, foreign affairs, what you think on any kind of social policy. That's everyone's viewpoint. We're only here for one reason. And I also often advise associations and their staff who are, if you're in Washington, you're here basically to help drive policy, and you might be very passionate about something, but keep it to yourself unless everyone always agrees with you, and then still keep it to yourself because you diminish the energy towards the goal of that coalition group or that group you're engaged with.
Okay, so this is the last question. What does your congressional communications report suggest are some of the best and most effective ways to get association messages across to lawmakers?
Right. So I did and this will be quickly, I did the report because when I became a lobbyist, people would tell me things like, go to this corner, stand here, right at the stairway. When the senator comes down, put your foot out 1 foot, then he'll have to stop, and then you can introduce yourself. I mean, all that stuff was BS that lobbyists tell other lobbyists to try to show that they're more important than they really are. And I thought I would like some more qualitative or quantitative reasons of what's going on. So I did the survey, as Mike said, 3 times, and then people on Capitol Hill no longer like doing surveys, and there's a lot of questions about, Russian or Chinese intelligence trying to get into our websites and stuff. So I don't blame them. But what did I learn? Number one, congressional staff are like information vacuums. They want the latest, newest information on whatever subject because their bosses want the latest information. So if you can provide good, solid research and information that's current, they'll appreciate it. You just got to tell them that you want to meet with them for this reason. Secondly, you want to build, and this is something which I made a mistake on as an association leader, which I wish I could have changed. I spent a ton of money making the beer wholesalers and the broadcasters be perceived as being powerful. I don't know retrospectively if they were or weren't, but I found out in the research that what members and staff care about are the reputations of the lobbyists or the people they're going to meet with, where I should have spent more money on them talking about how, because they were great people. I mean, they were exceptional people, how great they were rather than how great the organization was. That's number two. Number three, money didn't matter. Only 3% of all staffers who filled this out, and it was statistically significant, said that giving matters to their member. We all think that money dominates because the media tells us every day money dominates because they can go to the Federal Election Commission and see the amount given by industries or associations or groups, and then the votes and line them up and say, this member was bought by the beer wholesalers or the broadcast. Doesn't matter. That's really not true. They don't really, there's so much money. I mean, this is good and bad. There's so much money, it's really insignificant. And I think that if you're well researched, if you do a good presentation, if you provide both sides, you can do really well and you can get your message across. It's harder because they have less time. If you think about a member and a staffer, they're getting 140 emails on during COVID, they were getting over 1,000 a day, which I think people just can't answer because if you spend 10 seconds at 1,000 emails, that's like most of your day is gone. And your boss is raising their voice, asking for something. I shouldn't say yelling. I have a great respect for most members of Congress. And you just have to think about trying different ways. Well, let me say it this way. You have a target and you are shooting arrows at the target and the bullseye's there and you see the bullseye in the middle. Your arrows, you have to use different arrows to get on the target, let alone get in the bullseye. And that's your members, your research, your marketing, your lobbyists, maybe their assistants, their friends. There's a lot of different tools that you have at your disposal, which costs you nothing as an association, which you can utilize.
Yeah, I would also say most associations are sitting on a lot of data that they could use and they're not using
Right.
in that way.
Unless this member, I'm sorry, I know we got to go, but unless the member comes from your association, there is probably a better than 80% chance they're not going to know anything about it. If they're a medical doctor, they're going to know about being a doctor, but they're not going to know about being a beer wholesaler and what beer wholesalers do every day or broadcasters.
So I wanted to thank everybody for being here. Our next program, AXC program, is November 17th, and it's called Soulless AI, Protecting Your Association Voice in the Age of Algorithms. And again, that is November 17th. Thanks so much for David for speaking to us today, and for Mike for organizing the program. He's one of our 12 AXC volunteers, so thank you so much for doing that for us. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. Bye.